Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and this is video number 1 of 5 videos in a brand new Building a Campaign step-by-step video series. I do have many videos where I talk about how you can get started in building a one-shot, building an adventure, and building a campaign. You are probably familiar, if you've watched any of my videos, in my sort of the way that I wrangle through creativity, my 5-bullet system, how you can get started making some adventures for your group in Eberron or Wildemount. But I thought I would lean into some of those ideas and perhaps offer you even more. More tips, more tricks, more suggestions. A really nuanced, crunchy, in-depth point of view and take from my experience. There's no right, wrong, best way. You don't have to do this at all. But I thought I would just really dial in the sort of definitive building a campaign 101, if I dare say such a thing, because I don't think such a thing actually exists, and I would never be so presumptuous or arrogant to believe that I've got this all figured out. But you may be on the fence, you might be new. Perhaps you're a new dungeon master. You were recently volunteered, right? As the head of your game, of your table. You're going to run everything, and you have some ideas, but you're just not sure where to begin. So what is on screen here, and this is sort of video number 1, where I'm going to talk about the overview of what's going to happen, but we will go through a couple of points here. What's on screen are 10 bullet points, okay? As I was thinking through what my journey and my process is, let's just back up a moment. Let's pretend I've been volunteered as the DM. I volunteer myself as the DM. Every game. I'm on my 6th consecutive 5th edition campaign, okay? Some have lasted only 6-7 months, like Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. For whatever reason, we decided to move on and change. I think COVID kind of threw a wrench in everything, so we lost momentum a little bit, as is the case with most of the world. And a couple of other campaigns, my Silberrot campaign lasted almost 2 years, okay? So let's just pretend that I'm about to wrap up, which may be happening sooner than later. I would think by the end of the year. Our current group is playing in Eberron right now. It's my own story, my own campaign. Obviously, the world is already established, but it's my own thing, right? I'm not using any pre-published adventures or anything like that. And let's say it wraps up around Christmas. And we as a group decide that I, Rich, is going to be the dungeon master. And I need to get a new campaign set up, right? Everyone at my table, assuming I have the same players, so I'm familiar with everyone. Everyone's going to make some new characters. We're starting from scratch, level 1, as I often start at level 1. Maybe sometimes level 2, but for sake of explanation and to move forward, we're all starting at level 1, and I am going to be running the group through a campaign. So first off, let's also kind of delineate between what exactly are we going to be covering in all of these videos. I'm talking about a campaign, a big, grand thing, right? Something that takes players from level 1, from the beginning, to their ascension to greatness, whether it's becoming a god, becoming a deity, whether it's dying on the field of battle as a general, a commander of armies, whether it's retiring in some druid grove following their druid goddess, whatever it may be, right? You're not intending, yes, players might not like their characters and may change characters throughout the course of your campaign, but for the most part, you're intending to be invested in this for a long time. You've already gotten through the feel-out period of, do you even like the players at your group? You've already run Lost Mines of Phandelver or a small adventure to see if people even like the game. Everyone's committed. They're all in. Everyone wants to play D&D. They want you to run it, and they want to be in this for a little while. Okay? Like a year real time. So we are going to be building a campaign. Now, the campaign doesn't have to be a world of your own creation. You are going to create a campaign in Wildemount, in Ravnica, in Eberron, in Forgotten Realms, in some third-party thing, or in your own world. It doesn't matter. Now, to keep from being 3 hours for each video, I'm going to break this into 5 different videos. That's the overview, which was covered right now. And then I am going to talk through the first 2 bullet points. Now, there's 10 bullet points here, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there's 10. These don't necessarily need to be in order, but there is a little bit of a step-by-step process here because that's sort of how my mind was thinking through it when I typed this out. You can weave through these any way you want. Any of them that don't fit your style of game, throw them out. But I strongly suggest, which is the reason why you'd be watching this video, right? If you have it figured out, you don't need to study anymore. Just get to work and get to the table. I strongly suggest you at least kind of try and anchor to some of the things I talk about with these bullet points. So in this video, besides this overview, which I just gave you of what we're doing here, I am going to talk about the first two bullet points. The first one, lean into your inspirations, and the second one of prep, and all the things that fall underneath that. The next video, we're going to go over in detail the first 5 minutes of the session and establishing the world's uniqueness. That being said, let's just very quickly run through everything that's going to be covered in this video series. And by the end, which is hope and danger, you'll have a pretty good idea on the practical things, right? The things you can actually chew on and take with you that fill up your hours of prep time behind the scenes and fill up your hours of actual gameplay, rather than just staying flighty and in your head about the creative process, but you're not sure how to begin. I'm going to take you through every aspect of how to get crunch and gameplay to your table, which will eventually stack on top of each other and take you through 2, 3, 5 years of a single campaign. And obviously there's a lot of excuse me, 1 second. See, hold on. I don't have coffee, but I have an unhealthy drink. Obviously you'll have to make some changes and weave through these bullet points differently depending on what world you're playing in, depending on how many players are at your table. Some aspects of a small fight, for example, might change if you're only playing 3 to 4 players versus me playing 8 to 10 players. Okay? But every one of these things should work regardless of what campaign and regardless of whether you're using your own world or something pre-published. Okay? So let's just begin here with the very first one. I'm going to keep it sort of broad and blank in that all of these apply regardless of your own world or Eberron or Ravnica or Wildemount, okay? These all apply. Lean into your inspirations. If we backed up all the way to the beginning once again, you've been volunteered. You're going to be the Dungeon Master. Now, if you have a month before you start, you have a little more time to kind of think through these things, right? You can put a little more crunch in detail. But if you've been volunteered as the Dungeon Master to start a brand new campaign, and you need to start tonight, the game is happening in 7 hours, you've got to get through these things pretty quickly, okay? Now, here's the other point that I want to make with all 10 of these, even though we're only going to cover in detail the first 2 in this video. You're going to notice that the overall theme, if there was one thing to lean into in this whole video series, it is we are trying to build a session at a time. Because I believe if you build that single block, using all 10 of these bullet points, all 10 of these points, all 5 of these videos will apply to a single session. And again, regardless of whether it's a campaign in your own world or a pre-published world, also, it doesn't matter if that single session is 3 hours long or 12 hours long, or your single session is what's considered a whole weekend of gameplay, because you get together and then you don't get together again until a month later. It also doesn't matter how long between sessions. Okay, real lifetime stuff. All 10 of these will apply and will be things that you want to think through each time. And then when you stack that block, which has various aspects in various quantities and quality of all 10 of these bullet points, if you stack that block and you duplicate it and you put another block on top, thinking through these 10 again during your prep time between one session and the next, you stack those blocks on top of each other. That's a recurring theme in everything I do creatively, in the D&D space at least. You stack those on top of each other. You have session 1, session 2, session 3. 71 sessions later, you have a 3-year campaign. Okay? So, let's begin. The very first one. Lean into your inspirations. What is inspiring you right now, this moment? As a creative individual, you're sitting down right now. Pretend you're doing this with me. You're sitting at your computer. You have Microsoft Word open. You have a journal. You have all your books, all kinds of stuff, right? You have your snacks, Doritos, a Mountain Dew, a cup of coffee, brandy, cigar, whatever you have. You're in your space. Headphones on. You're in a Starbucks. You're out there. You're at a library, or you're sitting in the comfort of your own home, or you're hiding away in your closet, getting away from your family and your kids. Wherever you are, you're about to begin. I've got to get this campaign going. Again, the session is either tonight or it's next week. Doesn't matter. What inspires you? What are you sparked by right now? And separate it from specifically and only D&D. It doesn't have to be fantasy even. You don't have to think, well, it's not Harry Potter and wizards and a school. It's not Game of Thrones and everything north of the wall and the wildlings. It's not Tolkien. I haven't read that in a while. But, for example, for me, I'm looking. I mean, you can see a bunch of stuff behind me, which is why I have this stuff. Sometimes I'll just sit and sort of what I call spin. One thing I do a lot is I have thousands of pieces of artwork on my computer, saved in various folders, right? Concept art from my favorite concept artists, from my favorite movies, the concept art of God of War. Just Google search. This is all personal stuff, so you can get anything copyrighted, doesn't matter, right? I have people that I go to, artists and art studios that did, one of my favorite artists, Marko Djurjevic. He's the guy that's behind like the art and design of that book I talked about, to Genesis. He and his crew over at Six More Vodka over in Berlin, I believe, are the sole creators of all of the artwork for the not League of Legends. I think it is. The League of Legends inspired Hearthstone card game. There's hundreds of pieces of artwork there. What I will often do is just open up that Windows photo viewer and just hit page up, page down, and scroll through, almost like a flip book. So get the images into your head, like flashing. Just, you know how the beginning of the Marvel movies has that, and you see all those little flipping of pages? That's how you can find your inspirations. For me, I'll just spin in circles here. I'm looking at Bruce Lee, Michael Jordan, Hulk. I've got some pictures. You don't see them, and maybe I'll show a picture of these, of old school D&D books, Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto, Drizzt Do'Urden and the Halfling Gem, a bunch of World of Warcraft stuff, Diablo artwork, Overwatch. Let's look to the back. Beautiful woman up there. Michael Jordan, Spawn the comic, Death Dealer by Danzig. I think he was like the producer of that company that made that, and that's like Frazetta looking art, right? X-Men, Spider-Man, BioShock, God of War. What are you into right now? What are your inspirations? A movie you just watched. And again, it doesn't have to be D&D specific. I just made a video on this. Lean into that inspiration. Hold on to that. Okay? To give you one, and I'm coming up with this one on the fly, I promise. I didn't think of this. Even though I wrote this ahead of time, I didn't think of this inspiration. But I'm going to do a quick, allow me, if you would, 10 seconds. I got it. For my birthday recently, my daughter, I'm going to grab it. My kids are working people, and they're just proud that they have their own money, and they give back to Dad for all of the hundreds of thousands I've spent on them. Check this guy out. You can look it up online. It's a Dracolich miniature. It is adult green Dracolich. Pretty damn cool, right? I'll pop up a picture of it. So, we're just starting a campaign, right? What you don't want to do is you don't want to put any borders, boundaries, or barriers on your creativity. Because all of the cool stuff is there somewhere. And when you stay in, left brain, I think, and you stay in that creative mode, that childlike mind, that imagination state, you don't want to jump over to, and I may have the brains mixed up, but you don't want to jump over into right brain, which is where you get into that logic level. So don't start thinking, oh, it's a Dracolich, but we're starting a new campaign. They're only level 1. They can't fight that. That doesn't make any sense. Like, why a Dracolich? Like, they're never going to fight the Dracolich. Okay? Don't start thinking that. Just Dracolich. Visually, it just was a badass miniature on my shelf. It's a dragon with, like, wings all falling off. That's my inspiration. I don't know where that's going to go yet, and you may not see this come to fruition until the end of the 10th bullet point, which is video number 5. But that is my inspiration. So jot that down. Write that down, okay? Dracolich. There, it doesn't matter what color it is. Just Dracolich, undead dragon. Here we go. Now, next we have prep. You need to come to the table, and this is a real important bullet point. Perhaps the most important one, because this is what takes your mind and gets you out of your own headspace where you're just thinking as a cool storyteller and DM, and this is what actually gives you production value that your players can see, that they can feel and grab. That's why you have those awesome, what is it, Beetle and Grimm's, where they sell like a $500, of Out of the Abyss, or a $500 version of Curse of Strahd, and you open it up and it's like this cool trunk, and it's got all these little handouts, and the printouts are the handouts are printed on like parchment paper, and things look like they were burned by a candle and coffee stain, and then whenever there's like a soul coin or something, it's an actual physical, right? They're props. They're things to hold on to. That was a cool part about Deadlands, right? Is you actually have poker cards you can play around with. So what the prep does, what it allows you to do, is it gives you a checklist of things that you can actually start building. Things that I know I need to have ready for tonight. And again, if your game is a month from now, you have more time to build these things. You might be able to make your own little cards. Send it out to some playing card company that builds blank cards. Send them the print files, and they'll ship you a little playing deck of something that you want to use for your campaign. But if your game is tonight, you might just have to kind of crudely draw that on index cards, right? Again, you're limited by that time, how much you want to invest into it. But the prep is a very important bullet point to think through for each of your sessions and for the entirety of your campaign, because that's something you're always going to be doing. The more time you invest between sessions, the more it's going to show when you bring something to the table, okay? So, being that we've kind of briefly talked about those two, let's crunch onto those two a little more in this video, okay? The first one, leaning into your inspirations. We've already established, I just looked up on my shelf up there, and I chose a Dracolich. Okay. I don't know if I want to use a dragon at all. Right? It feels too familiar, too simple. Hey guys, we're starting a new D&D campaign, and guess what? The big boss is a dragon. The land that you're in is scorched by dragon fire. The guards are on high alert because they heard there's a dragon, right? That sounds so Skyrim. It's Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's just the same logic for me of, I don't always need to. You can, and you can have amazing games and sessions and campaigns by going this route. But I don't always like to start with a dungeon or a dragon, or have any part of that included in. Okay? Which is why I think it's important to lean into your inspirations, especially when they're outside of D&D. Because you may be watching Sopranos and Goodfellas and thinking mafia and gangs, but translate how that applies when you've got thieves guilds and who's sort of the family that's leading this city. And now you can have really intriguing gameplay in a D&D space, right? How does Jason Bourne and Bourne Identity translate into D&D gameplay? But you can start creating some really new, interesting mechanics and new things using monsters that you wouldn't have used before. Versus just saying you start in a tavern, there's a dungeon nearby where there's some hidden relic that you need to go find. You have a Mario Brothers-esque, I have to go search for a princess and rescue someone. There's a dragon attack that was rumored, and now you need to go investigate a little bit further, right? You know, those sort of, there's a village that you started in, and everyone you know and loved and your family is all dead because it was invaded by humanoids. There's goblins and orcs involved, and it was led by some giant. Familiar miniatures, right? Find obscure stuff. Start your campaign with a Modron, right? Robotic people, or the husk of a construct or something like that, inspired by something from Warhammer 40k. So lean into your inspirations. I'm using this Dracolich, but I don't know if I want to use a dragon, but I am going to lean into the undead element, okay? What that does is now that starts getting my headspace. I can start looking at horror movies. I can start looking at zombie movies. I can watch World War Z tonight if you have the time and your game is not till later. I can start looking at undead motifs or artists that draw, whether it's Dia de los Muertos, whether it's the Pixar movies of Book of Life, or what's the other one, Coco, I think, or whatever it was, right? Look up H.R. Giger, Aliens, Clive Barker, Hellraiser, right? You don't have to go down like uncomfortable scary, and it doesn't have to be you're beginning your campaign with a horror element, but just start looking at undead. Get into that vibe, that feel, right? Get your headspace wrapped around that so that you can start thinking. The inspiration starts informing where your mind creatively is going, right? See, notice I'm not going carnivals necessarily. You could. Where did that come from? Where did the idea of carnival and circus just come from? I was thinking of playing Left 4 Dead, and that's one of the adventures. Or one of the levels, I think, right? Where you got to pull down this lever to summon the boat, but it's like a rock star concert venue and there's a stage, but that noise attracts the zombies, right? But when you're getting in the headspace of undead and bones, you can start thinking one way and you start removing some of the other creative flood that can come in. You're not putting barriers on it yet. I'm still staying creative. I'm not figuring out, well, what undead can my PCs fight at level 1? Don't go there yet. Just start thinking bones, undead, okay? Inspired by Walking Dead. Look up the Walking Dead soundtrack. You know what you've just done? You now remove the burden of what music do I need to start with. Start with Walking Dead. Start with 30 Days of Night, right? That's vampires. What's the other one? 28 Days Later, right? Start with these soundtracks. Go on Spotify. Go on Google. Who's the composer that created those soundtracks? What video games? Last of Us? You see where I'm going with that? You can start playing these things. Resident Evil? But now you have a soundtrack. But now you also have, if you have any design chops, as I do, like in Photoshop, I know now when we start, notice how we're going back and forth between my inspiration, which is not just dragons specifically, but undead, bones, death, that sort of thing, right? Necromancy. That's my inspiration. That is what I'm coming to the table to begin my campaign. But now, that bone, macabre, sort of darker motif informs the parchment or the paper that I'm going to put into my printer. Everything is going to have a little bit of grit to it. Everything is going to be some sort of a text or a font that looks like it's rusty, right? What do they call it? Grunge. Everything just has a layer of dirt and filth to it. Right? Very Walking Dead-esque. And that's what I'm bringing to my table when I hand them a spell sheet. Or, hey guys, I'm printing out character sheets for you guys that aren't going to do it digitally and use just your iPads and do it on D&D Beyond. But I just printed it out on different paper and I burned the edges a little bit and I kind of ran it through in the backyard and put some rocks and dirt on it. And it just looks scratched and a little bit gritty. But it starts selling the whole thing. You put on Last of Us soundtrack, and now you're starting to build a sort of theme, a tone, right? And what that does is that gets you excited. It starts to inform where you need to be. You might be a little more serious as you present the session for them. So find your inspiration. And that undead, necromancy, that applies in Forgotten Realms. It applies in Planescape. It applies across editions, not just 5th edition. It applies in all aspects of D&D. It applies in your own world. It applies also anywhere. That undead, Walking Dead, Last of Us inspired sort of theme and tone to your first session of this brand new campaign. It works in Sharn. It works in the Mournland, obviously. It works over in Drome. So anywhere in Eberron, right? It works in Waterdeep. It works in Undermountain. It works among, obviously, like the Orzhov Syndicate, I think it is, from Ravnica, where the Ghost Council is like the leadership of that. But that also works down below in like Druid of the Spores. I forget the group. The real dirty trash compactor people down there, one of the 10 guilds of Ravnica. It works across tone and theme applies across all worlds, all places. Right? Because you're just getting a feeling. There's a grittiness to it all. And that comes from inspiration, whatever that inspiration is. So step 1, find your inspiration. That is how you're going to begin building your campaign. But that just keeps you in the right mindset. What am I building with that? Now we need to get into prep. What do I need to bring to the table? I've got some new players. They're going to want spell cards. Someone didn't go out and buy the spell cards, right? Or I want to have little cheat sheets that just simply say to my new players, whenever you make an attack, all in bold, you always want to roll the following, a d20. And then show a picture of the d20. So that way you give that to them, and then when you go and say, hey, Susie, can you go ahead and make an attack? When they're new to the game entirely, and they're like, I don't know what to do. Well, look on your sheet. It says right there in bold, when you make an attack, do the following. They're going to, okay, I grab that dice, and then, okay, I look down, I'm going to add my strength. Oh, what? Hold on. I'm far away. I'm not in close. I'm going to add my dexterity instead, right? But think of how cool it is when those cheat sheets have sort of this ghosted image behind it of, you know, a post-apocalyptic city, very Walking Dead-esque, right? Something from Book of Eli or something like that. But notice, it helps you tonight of what do I need to bring to the table? I need cheat sheets for the players that are not familiar with the game. Sort of a quick checklist of 10 things, or go to page this, go to page this, of rules, conditions. What are my options in attack? What does dodge do? Here's one for my rogue who's a brand new player. Here's where the rogue section starts. So on and so forth, right? What maps do I need? I need a map of the area where they're going to start to think. And again, I know that it feels like your prep, I should say, the prep applies to all of the bullet points. So remember, watch all 5 of these videos because you'll get the entire sort of spectrum, and then you'll see where each of these bullet points kind of interact with one another. Once I decide one of those other bullet points, which is, it'll be on what? Video, where is it at? First 5 minutes of the session, which is the next bullet point number 3, which will come in and be explained further in the next video. The first 5 minutes of the session is literal. If I was to set a clock, what do I say or explain in the first 5 minutes of the session? Where are you starting? But where I'm starting now informs information that I need for bullet point 2, which is what maps do I need to create? Remember, we've already established we're going to create this map with a very gritty feel to it, right? Everything feels darker because we're thinking of that inspiration of undead, of necromancy. But I'm going to make a map of the tavern where my group starts out in, and so on, okay? So lean into your inspirations. That's most important because that's what gets your head in the right space. And then the second one is start with whatever prep you can. And as you go through each of these 10 bullet points, keep going back to prep because it's the prep, more importantly than anything else, that gives you the things that you need to bring to the next session. You don't need to bring cheat sheets and little handouts of what are the combat actions after session 1, because the assumption is those new players have that. Say, hey, at the end of every session, bring your character home, but bring those little note cards with you and bring them to every session so they have that to refer to over and over again. But of course, the maps, the images of the NPCs they meet is always going to change. But as long as you have that checklist of what do I need to prep? What are the physical things that my players get to hold on to during the game? As long as you think through that, you're always going to know what to build, what to make, what terrain do you need, what miniatures need to be painted. And that gives you so much because it gets you out of thinking idea and it gets you into building, into doing something with it, right? I always say, you might have the greatest idea for a book, but there's so much more power when you actually start typing 10 pages. And you do that for 20 days in a row. That's how you write a 200-page book. The only difference, there's much more differences, between Stephen King and any of us is he's actually written the books. How many times have you read something, watched something, and said, I had that idea 20 years ago. Man, I thought of something just as cool as that. But they did something with it. Prep, the second bullet point, is how you start doing something. But you're keeping a consistent tone, a consistent theme. Right now, we're starting off with undead. That may persist into the next session and multiple sessions. But if you go through these 10 points every time you build a new session for the next one that's upcoming, you might have a different inspiration. But the great thing about it is, who knows, if your sessions are spread apart by 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks from now, you're not into undead anymore. You're zombied out. You're into something totally different. Use that inspiration. Eventually, you'll figure out how to weave them into one another. Okay? So that's it for the first 2 bullet points and the introduction to this Building a Campaign step-by-step video series. Stay tuned for the next video. See you guys.